Look out at your garden right now. Really look at it. You have poured your weekends, your sweat, and your hard-earned money into this patch of earth. The perennials you lovingly tucked into the soil are healthy, the annuals are vibrant, and the beds are entirely full. Yet, as you stand on your porch with your morning coffee, there is a lingering, quiet frustration. The space doesn't look bad exactly, but it doesn't look right. It feels flat. It feels cluttered. It lacks that effortless, timeless elegance of a professional estate, the kind of landscape that feels deeply rooted, structured, and profoundly expensive. What you are sensing is a silent, invisible design imbalance. 9 times out of 10, a garden that feels incomplete is a garden without a spine. It is a space that lacks its structural backbone. We often fall into the trap of buying plants on impulse, chasing the fleeting, frantic blooms of spring perennials. But when those fleeting petals drop, the entire landscape collapses into a monotonous, 2-dimensional green wall for the next 5 months of the year. June is your golden final window to rewrite this narrative and restore balance to your land. Right now, the soil has warmed to its perfect depth, encouraging rapid, robust root establishment before the true oppressive heat of midsummer arrives. The nurseries are still rich with lush physical inventory. Anything you commit to the earth today has the entire second half of the growing season to stretch its roots, anchor itself, and settle in before it must face the harsh, cold reality of its first winter. Today, we are unlocking the secret of the permanent garden by exploring the first structural masterpieces that will elevate your home's exterior, making it look incredibly high-end, intentional, and visually rich across all 4 seasons. Let us begin with our first essential anchor, the majestic panicle hydrangea. This plant belongs at the absolute pinnacle of landscape design for a single magical reason that nurseries rarely highlight. Its blooms undergo a spectacular, self-driven seasonal color transformation. Unlike typical shrubs that offer a brief 2-week flash of color before fading into background green, the panicle hydrangea is a living, changing sculpture. In July, its massive flower heads open as a clean, crisp, creamy white, catching the bright summer sun. As the August nights begin to cool, those pristine petals gently blush into a soft, delicate pink. By September, they deepen into a rich, dramatic crimson rose that clings to the stems, drying naturally on the plant and holding its elegant structure well into the depths of winter. To achieve this expensive, high-contrast look, choosing the right cultivar is critical. Limelight is the legendary industry standard, opening with soft chartreuse green flower-ones that age gracefully to white and then deep pink. It is a grand, sweeping shrub that easily reaches 6 to 8 feet in height, making it the perfect back-of-border structural wall. If you are working with a tight front foundation bed or a cozy courtyard, do not squeeze a limelight where it doesn't fit. Instead, opt for Little Lime, its compact sibling, which delivers the exact same color-shifting magic, but tops out at a neat 3 to 4 feet. For those who crave maximum architectural drama, Pinky Winky offers striking, highly conical, bicolor flower spikes that display fresh white tips on a deep pink base simultaneously. However, many gardeners make a heartbreaking, costly mistake with this plant. They plant it in too much shade. Because the word hydrangea is so closely associated with the shade-loving, blue and pink mophead varieties, people automatically assume the panicle hydrangea wants to hide under a dark canopy. This is a botanical tragedy. The panicle hydrangea is an entirely different species that demands the sun. It requires a minimum of 6 hours of direct sunlight, though 8 hours is where it truly thrives. If you trap it in heavy shade, its stems will grow weak, leggy, and floppy, collapsing under the weight of sparse, disappointing blooms that never reach their full color potential. Move that very same plant into the blazing sun, and within a single season, it transforms into an upright, sturdy, and abundant masterpiece. When you plant your hydrangea this June, dig your hole twice as wide as the root ball, but no deeper. Deep planting suffocates the root flare and is the primary cause of slow, stunted establishment. Backfill with your native soil amended with organic compost and water deeply twice a week. Do not waste your resources on chemical soil acidifiers like aluminum sulfate. Unlike blue hydrangeas, panicle types are entirely unaffected by soil pH and will change color beautifully on their own schedule. To keep them pristine, prune them back by 1/3 in late winter. This stimulates strong, thick new wood that easily holds those heavy, dramatic late summer blooms upright against the autumn wind. Our second essential anchor is a plant that has been unfairly dismissed by some as too ordinary, yet remains one of the most reliable workhorses of high-end design. The modern, reblooming shrub rose. Walk through any premium neighborhood, and you will see these plants massed in low, continuous drifts along driveways and stone pathways. Why? Because they bloom with a relentless, fierce consistency that no other flowering shrub can match, cycling fresh waves of color every 5 to 6 weeks from early June until the first hard freeze of winter. For a classic, disease-resistant hedge that frames your property with romantic structure, the Double Knockout offers full, rich, rose-like blooms in a deeply saturated cherry red. If your color palette leans softer and more sophisticated, Sunny Knockout provides a rare, buttery yellow hue that blends exquisitely into casual, warm-toned cottage borders. If you need to soften the hard, cold edges of a stone walkway or a low patio wall, the Drift series mounds tightly at just 2 feet tall, acting as a colorful, low-maintenance flowering carpet. The great tragedy of the shrub rose is how people treat them. Gardeners often make the mistake of treating these modern, resilient hybrids like delicate, fussy exhibition roses. They spray them weekly with harsh chemicals, fertilize them constantly, and deadhead them obsessively. Modern shrub roses do not want to be coddled. They have been specifically bred for exceptional disease resistance and self-cleaning habits. The far more damaging mistake, however, is pruning them in the autumn and considering the job complete. Shrub roses actually demand a hard, rejuvenative prune in early spring, just as the leaf buds begin to swell. Cutting them back by 1/3 to 1/2 of their height may feel incredibly severe, but it is the secret to their longevity. This hard reset stimulates clean, vigorous new stems, which is precisely where the best and most abundant flowers of the season are produced. If you skip this spring pruning, your rose will slowly devolve into a congested, twiggy, woody thicket. This restricts airflow through the center of the plant, creating the exact humid environment where black spot and fungal diseases take hold. Plant them in full sun, give them breathing room away from walls, and they will reward you with continuous color for decades. These first 2 selections are the very foundation upon which a rich, multi-layered, and expensive-looking garden is built. If you are ready to embark on this beautiful, rewarding journey to cultivate a landscape that feels deeply intentional and timelessly elegant, take a brief moment to join our community. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you are watching and gardening from, hit the like button, subscribe to Rooted Living, and turn on notifications so you never miss a single step of our upcoming seasonal guides. Sharing your local context helps our community grow, and it helps other gardeners in your specific region find exactly what works. Once you have established your primary flowering anchors, you must turn your attention to the unsung hero of high-end landscape design, foliage. If you look closely at professional estate-level gardens, you will notice they do not rely on a chaotic, constant explosion of flowers to capture your attention. Flowers are fleeting, temporary bursts of energy that fade as quickly as they arrive. Foliage, however, is the permanent canvas. It is the living backdrop that carries your garden through the scorching heat of July and the quiet descent of October. When a landscape relies solely on plain green leaves, it flattens out, losing its dimension and looking ordinary. To create a space that feels visually rich and expensive, we must master the art of dramatic leaf contrast. And there is no better way to start than with our third essential shrub, the dark foliaged weigela. Traditionally, weigela was treated as a simple, one-hit wonder spring bloomer. It would put on a beautiful show of pink in early June, and then spend the next 5 months blending into the monotonous green background. But the introduction of modern, dark-leaved cultivars changed everything. With a variety like wine and roses, the foliage is the main event. Its leaves emerge in spring as a deep, saturated burgundy black, providing an immediate, high-contrast focal point long before a single blossom appears. When the hot pink, trumpet-shaped flowers finally open in June, the contrast against those dark, moody leaves is so striking that it stops visitors in their tracks. For tighter spaces or low borders, midnight wine is a stunning dwarf selection that stays under 2 feet, while spilled wine spreads wider than it grows tall, creating a luxurious carpet of deep wine-colored foliage that drapes beautifully over stone walkways. To preserve this rich dark pigment, weigela must have full sun. In the shade, those magnificent burgundy leaves will slowly revert to a dull, muddy olive green, stripping the plant of its dramatic character. But there is a common heartbreaking mistake that gardeners make with weigela: incorrect pruning. Because it is a woody shrub, many well-meaning homeowners prune it during their routine early spring garden cleanup. This is a botanical tragedy that will cost you an entire year of color. Weigela blooms exclusively on old wood, meaning the flower buds for this season were meticulously set on the stems produced last July and August. If you prune in the spring, you are literally shearing off every single flower bud before it has a chance to open. You will be left with a healthy, leafy green bush and absolutely zero flowers. The correction is beautifully simple. Prune your weigela immediately after it finishes blooming in late June or early July. Cut the spent flowering stems back by about 1/3. This prompts the shrub to spend the rest of the summer pushing out fresh, vigorous new growth, which will carry next spring's spectacular blooms. Let us pause for a moment and have an honest conversation. Have you ever gone out into your yard in early spring with your pruners filled with energy, only to realize months later that you accidentally cut away an entire season of flowers? It is a rite of passage for almost every gardener, yet we rarely talk about it. If you have made this mistake, or any other painful pruning error, share your story in the comments below. Sharing our mistakes is how we take the pressure off ourselves and help beginners realize that a beautiful garden is built on a foundation of trial and error. If you are enjoying this deep dive, take a second to hit that like button. It tells us we are providing the practical depth you've been looking for. As we transition into late July, most yards hit a notorious dusty summer lull. The spring flush is a distant memory, and the rich colors of autumn are still weeks away. This is where our 4th shrub, the butterfly bush, acts as an absolute lifesaver. It blooms relentlessly from July all the way into October, filling the midsummer gap with an unparalleled kinetic energy. A mature specimen in August is a sight to behold, bringing your yard to life with a continuous flurry of swallowtails, monarchs, and hummingbirds. The sensory experience is completed by its rich, honey-like fragrance, which grows strongest in the warm, late afternoon air, carrying 20 or 30 feet across your property. However, we must address the environmental issue. In some regions, particularly the Pacific Northwest, the standard species of butterfly bush has self-seeded so aggressively along natural waterways that it is classified as invasive. The professional design solution is not to banish this beautiful plant from our yards, but to choose modern, sterile cultivars. Series like Pugster, Lo and Behold, and Blue Chip Jr. are genetically sterile. They produce the same magnificent flowers, the same rich fragrance, and the same high pollinator activity. But they cannot produce viable seeds, making them entirely safe for the surrounding ecosystem. They are also bred to stay compact and structured, preventing them from becoming the wild, leggy eyesores of older varieties. For the most expensive-looking contrast, choose deep, saturated purples like Pugster Blue or Black Knight. Pale lavender varieties tend to wash out against green backdrops, but deep, velvety purples command immediate attention. The mistake here is twofold: planting in partial shade and neglecting to deadhead. Butterfly bushes demand 8 hours of direct, blazing sun and exceptionally well-drained soil. In the shade, they become weak, floppy, and sparse. Furthermore, if you leave the faded flower spikes on the plant, it signals to the shrub that its reproductive job is done, and bloom production slows down. To keep the color engine running until frost, cut each spent flower spike back to the next set of leaves below. This simple task takes minutes but forces the plant to continuously push out fresh, fragrant bloom spikes. Our 5th essential shrub is arguably the most underused native plant in modern residential landscaping, the ninebark. Because it is a native North American species, it is practically indestructible. It co-evolved with our native wildlife, meaning its spring flowers feed early pollinators, and its autumn bead clusters provide critical winter food for goldfinches. But from a pure design perspective, it is a four-season masterpiece. It offers delicate white flowers in spring, deep burgundy leaves in summer, fiery orange foliage in autumn, and exquisite peeling cinnamon and copper bark in the winter. Cultivars like Diablo offer a dark, sophisticated backdrop, while Darts Gold provides a shocking pop of chartreuse yellow to brighten dark corners. Tiny Wine offers this incredible texture in a compact 3 to 4 foot frame. The mistake with ninebark is planting the dark-leaved varieties in partial shade, where they lose their saturated depth and shearing the plant into a formal shape. Ninebark has a naturally graceful, arching, fountain-like form. If you take hedge trimmers to it, you ruin its architectural elegance. The correct approach is renewal pruning. Every spring, reach into the base of the plant and cut a few of the oldest, thickest woody stems down to the ground. This keeps the center of the shrub open, healthy, and beautifully shaped. If you want to support your local wildlife while creating a landscape that turns heads, ninebark is the ultimate design shortcut. If this vision of a sustainable, structurally rich garden resonates with you, consider sharing this video with a friend or neighbor who is currently planning their yard. To build a garden that feels like a true sanctuary, we must step away from the rigid, unnatural control we so often try to impose on nature. We have all seen it, the suburban landscape where every shrub has been sheared into a perfect, lifeless green dome, looking more like a collection of concrete spheres than living, breathing plants. It feels sterile, it feels dated, it lacks the wild, breathing elegance of a high-end estate. This brings us to our sixth essential shrub, the colored foliage Japanese spirea. If you walk into a standard garden center, you might be tempted to pass right by the spirea, dismissed by many as a common parking lot utility plant. But the modern, colored foliage cultivars are an entirely different botanical argument. Varieties like Magic Carpet do not just sit there being green. They undergo a breathtaking, self-driven seasonal transition, emerging with coppery orange leaves in the spring, softening to a vibrant, luminous yellow-green in the summer, and finally deepening into a rich, fiery red-orange in the autumn. Double Play Gold holds a bright, clean golden yellow hue all season long, punctuated by soft, delicate pink flowers. When planted in a continuous flowing line along a driveway or a winding stone path, spaced about 18 to 24 inches apart, these plants do something extraordinary. They knit together into a low, undulating ribbon of changing color that softens the hard edges of your concrete or stone, giving your home's entrance the manicured, intentional look of a professionally designed estate. But there is a critical, devastating mistake that homeowners make with spirea, and you see it everywhere in the thumbnails of neighborhood frustration: shearing. Taking electric hedge trimmers and forcing this naturally graceful, arching plant into a tight, formal ball. Shearing destroys the plant's natural arching elegance, cuts off the summer flower buds, and creates a dense, congested outer shell of leaves that suffocates the interior of the shrub. Over time, the inside of the plant becomes a hollow, twiggy graveyard of dead wood. The correction is beautifully simple: put down the hedge trimmers. In the early spring, reach deep into the base of the plant and prune away only the oldest, woodiest stems. This allows the younger, pliable branches to cascade naturally in a soft fountain of color. After the first summer bloom flush, simply run your gloves lightly through the top of the foliage to sweep away the spent pink flowers. This 2-minute task triggers a second, clean wave of color that carries deep into the autumn. Have you ever inherited a yard filled with those sheared, woody green meatballs? It is a common landscaping tragedy that makes a home feel dated and rigid. Tell us in the comments below if you've had to rescue a sheared shrub and how you brought it back to its natural, graceful state. Your experiences help other gardeners break free from the trap of high maintenance, unnatural shearing. Now, let us introduce our seventh champion of the permanent garden, potentilla, also known as shrubby cinquefoil. If there is one plant on this list that represents absolute unyielding resilience, it is this one. While almost every other flowering shrub gives you a beautiful window of color and then rests, potentilla simply does not stop. From early June until the first heavy freezing frost of November, it is covered in a quiet, continuous blanket of delicate blooms that look like tiny wild roses. The cultivar abbotswood is a designer's secret weapon. It produces pure, clean white flowers set against a soft backdrop of textured blue-green foliage. If you want to create a space that looks deeply thought out and expensive, plant abbotswood in front of a dark, moody background, such as our dark-leaved Diablo ninebark. As the late autumn winds clear the rest of your perennial beds, this combination remains untouched, a brilliant contrast of crisp white flowers against dark, coppery seed heads. If your palette requires a warmer, sunnier disposition, Happy Face Yellow offers bright, cheerful yellow blooms on a tidy, compact 2-foot frame that requires no coddling, no deadheading, and practically no water once its roots have found their home. The mistake here is not in how you care for potentilla, but in neglecting its need for renewal. Left completely unpruned for 5 or 6 years, the center of the shrub becomes congested, woody, and weak. The flowers grow smaller, and the stems begin to sag under their own weight, looking tired and messy. To keep it pristine, apply the rule of renewal. Every 3 to 4 years, cut the oldest, thickest canes down to the ground in early spring. Or, if you have inherited an old, neglected specimen, perform a complete structural reset. Cut the entire plant down to 6 inches from the soil before spring growth begins. It looks severe, even terrifying, but by midsummer, it will regrow into a lush, dense, and incredibly productive flowering mound. This brings us to the core design principles that tie these 7 masterpieces together, turning a random collection of nursery purchases into a cohesive, breathtaking landscape. If you look at the thumbnails of successful high-end gardens, they always rely on 3 simple visual laws. First, plant in triangles, never in straight, single height lines. A flat row of identical shrubs at the same height creates a cold commercial barrier. Instead, place your tallest structural anchor, like a panicle hydrangea, at the back. Flank it with a medium height transition like weigela, and finish the front edge with a low, mounding spirea or potentilla. This triangular silhouette creates physical depth, drawing the eye naturally through the layers of your landscape. Second, prioritize foliage contrast over the fleeting memory of flowers. Pair fine textures with bold, broad leaves. Place dark burgundy foliage directly beside bright chartreuse gold. This contrast ensures your garden looks striking, deliberate, and expensive every single day of the growing season, even on the days when nothing is in bloom. Third, always plant in odd numbers. In natural, informal designs, groupings of 3, 5, or 7 of the same variety look organic and entirely intentional. Even numbers split the visual focus, creating an accidental symmetry that is difficult to balance. When you apply these principles, you construct a 4-season symphony that unfolds across the year. Spring opens with the fresh, vibrant foliage of ninebark and spirea. June brings the dramatic hot pink blooms of weigela against near-black leaves. July and August usher in the peak of summer, with hydrangeas opening in creamy white, while the butterfly bush draws a kinetic flurry of wings. September brings the great transition, as the hydrangeas shift to deep pink and the ninebark foliage turns a rich orange-red. And in the dead of winter, the peeling copper bark of the ninebarks and the dried hydrangea heads holding the snow ensure your yard never looks empty or abandoned. A garden that looks expensive does not require a massive bank account. It simply requires more intentional thought. Which of these 7 shrubs would solve the biggest design problem in your yard today? Let us know in the comments. Share this video with someone who is currently staring at a blank canvas of a yard, and thank you for growing with us on Rooted Living.